We have to talk about this. Okay. Reading through all of this, right? In public discourse, extreme rhetoric like this right here often surfaces mostly during heated political debates, which is fair. This is a heated debate. When prominent media executives are responding to Supreme Court birthright citizenship rulings by floating the idea of the, quote, sterilization of all foreign visitors prior to entry. Some people might have said that this was just an internet provocation, but that kind of language, what the actual, you guys. Historically, using bodily violation as a tool for demographic and legal control isn't a new concept in America. Let that sink in, okay? So to understand why this specific kind of language resonates so heavily, we have to look to the past modern headline and back to a dark institutionalized chapter of American history where forced sterilization wasn't just a provocative post, it was actually federal policy. This has happened in this country already. So the logic behind this modern suggestion is rooted in demographic control. If you prevent a specific group of people from reproducing, you effectively eliminate their future generations' ability to claim legal rights, citizenship, or physical presence within a country. Historically, this exact framework was weaponized against Native Americans. But whereas today's commentary exists as a social media post, in the 20th century, the infrastructure to execute it was fully institutionalized through the federal government here in the United States. But the target wasn't foreign visitors at the border. It was indigenous women's rights inside their own sovereign nations, managed by a federal agency called the Indian Health Service, or the IHS. And just think about that. For decades, the full scale of what happened inside the Indian Health Service facilities has been kept in the shadows. And yet people are talking like this. It wasn't even until the mid-1970s that the truth began to emerge about these things. And that was sparked by the activism of Native women and doctors who noticed an alarming pattern. In 1976, the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, launched an investigation. They looked at just 4 out of 12 IHS regional areas over a brief 3-year period between 1973 and 1976, and the findings were staggering. In those 4 areas, over those 3 years, the federal government sterilized 3,406 Native American women. Subsequent independent research by historians, including Dr. Jane Lawrence, revealed an even more devastating scope. Estimates suggest that between 25 to 50% of Native American women of childbearing age were sterilized during the 1970s, a generation of potential life having been systematically erased. And, how does an institutional policy like this happen in modern democracy, you might ask? It happens through the abuse of power, especially over vulnerable populations. And then we got this right here. This rhetoric targets quote-unquote foreign visitors at the border, a place where individuals are subject to absolute state authority and stripped of standard domestic legal protections. Let that sink in, really. Historically, the state used systemic vulnerability to bypass basic human rights. They've done this over and over in many different circumstances and situations. The IHS did not always perform these procedures completely in secret. Instead, they relied on a heavily comprised definition of consent, not transparent and informed consent. Medical professionals utilized systemic coercion, and women were frequently told that a hysterectomy or tubal ligation was temporary and reversible. Completely lied to them, mischaracterizing it as a womb cleaning. In other cases, doctors threaten women under duress, stating that if they did not sign the sterilization forms, their welfare benefits would be entirely revoked or their existing children would be taken away by the state. Forms were even pushed in front of mothers who were heavily sedated or in the active painful stage of labor. Consent was a paperwork formality masked by institutional force. This practice didn't emerge from a vacuum. It was the direct legal descendant of the American eugenics movement, which was codified into law by the highest court in the land. In the landmark 1927 case Buck versus Bell, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the state had the right to forcibly sterilize people deemed unfit or a burden on public resources. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes famously wrote, "3 generations of imbeciles are enough." That ruling was never explicitly overturned. It provided the legal and ideological bedrock that allowed state-sanctioned sterilization to target minority populations, disabled individuals, and indigenous communities for the next 50 years. So, when today's political figures and commentators float the idea of mass sterilization as a solution to constitutional protections like birthright citizenship, they are pulling from this exact historical reservoir. They are reviving the eugenicist belief that the state should use bodily violation to engineer a specific political, national, or demographic outcome. Words matter. Rhetoric does not exist in a vacuum. When we look at proposals online regarding immigration and citizenship, history reminds us that these ideas have a lineage. The forced sterilization of Native Americans shows us what happens when a society views a demographic population not as human beings with inherent rights, but as political or legal problem that needs to be solved by cutting off their future. Understanding this history is vital, because if we don't recognize the patterns of the past, we risk normalizing this dangerous rhetoric as if it's nothing but a passing headline, and it isn't. This is unacceptable. This is more eugenicist ideology. We cannot accept this. This is not American. This is fascist, and it's disgusting.